at home and things are more quiet, but Israeli regime has been slaughtering Lebanese today, and they've been carpet bombing all sorts of different cities and in violation of the ceasefire agreement. Although Trump says it's not a part of the ceasefire, but the Pakistani prime minister has said very clearly, and he tweeted that Lebanon is part of the ceasefire. And since the regime is continuing its slaughter and they're just targeting ordinary people, the Iranians have fired missiles and they've shut down the Strait of Hormuz again. So it's unclear where things are going to go, whether we're going to have continued airstrikes against us by the Israeli regime or not. I think that probably will continue, and we'll have to see what the Americans do.
Yeah, I should have said we're recording this now today on the 8th of April, and you were just saying before we started recording that as we speak, Iranian missiles are now flying towards Israel in response to Israel's breach of the ceasefire agreement. But I guess a good place to start would be then, what are the actual terms? Because I find this to be quite extraordinary, that it's quite an important ceasefire. I mean, the whole world is, captured by this war against Iran, and we're getting, Wall Street Journal saying this, Reuters saying that. I mean, what are the actual terms, and why is it so difficult to get a very clear-cut answer to this?
Well, first, the United States said that Iran must surrender. They said unconditional surrender, at least Trump did, like in the previous 12-day war. And then gradually that evolved into the 15-point plan, which Iran rejected. And then Iran began to develop its own plan, which the Supreme National Security Council gave to the leader, Ayatollah Seyed Marandi Mohammad, and he made some changes. They finalized the plan and sent it to Pakistan. And ultimately, Trump agreed that this would be the framework for negotiations. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to have peace. It doesn't mean that the United States will agree to these 10 points, even though they are very reasonable. But the United States being an empire and an extremely arrogant empire, it's very difficult to imagine them capitulating and accepting the rights of a nation. So my personal view is that either we're going to go back to war, but it would be difficult for the United States for a number of reasons. One is that there's a lot of internal pressure in the United States. That's why Trump accepted this in the first place, the Iranian framework. And there's a lot of international pressure on the United States. And remember, the Strait of Hormuz right now, as we speak, is closed. And in addition to that, I was in the war many years ago, so I can't say I'm an expert on military affairs. When I fought, it was the 1980s as a volunteer, but that was a long time ago. But U.S. equipment brought to them, obviously, have to remain in the region as the Persian Gulf gets very humid and hot. And that will have sandstorms in the Arabian Peninsula. And if I recall correctly, in the past wars against Iraq, subsequently, the U.S. military had lots of damage, and they had to spend literally hundreds of billions of dollars to repair all the trucks and the planes and all that. And this time round, they're not even well protected because their bases have been destroyed and they were rushed into the region, and it was supposed to be a very short war where they would easily defeat Iran. And so I think it's going to be very difficult for the United States to maintain this force in the region without it becoming a larger and more difficult burden as each day goes by. But still, the Iranians are preparing themselves for the worst. They're not going to, because we already negotiated with Americans twice, and we saw how both of those attempts to negotiate turned out. One, as we were negotiating, they launched a 12-day war a blitzkrieg attack. And then last month, again, we were negotiating, making progress, and they launched another war. So it's not as if the Iranians are going to have any faith in the upcoming negotiations. And as I said, as we speak, the Israelis are doing whatever they can to prevent peace from spreading. These vicious attacks on Lebanon, just slaughtering women and children. Hundreds so far have been murdered in the last few hours. It's just unbelievable carnage. This is being done to prevent the ceasefire from working. And Trump, by changing his position, by saying that Lebanon is not a part of it, is showing both his own weakness and it is showing us that we should be prepared for renewed war, despite the difficulties that would have for the United States.
Yeah, so Joe Kent, he was, tweeting out a recording of himself where he was making the argument, if the U.S. wants this peace deal to work, then they have to find a way of restraining Israel. His argument was that Israel will do anything possible to disrupt this peace, so prevent. Again, that's not really delving into conspiracy theories, because if you follow the Israeli media today, they are, devastated almost. I saw also video of people like Mark Levin, not in Israel, of course, but almost shaking out of, frustration that this ceasefire could have been accepted. And so again,
I'm sure they're taking a lot of pleasure in the bombing of Lebanese cities and the massacre of women and children, because that's how they really are. And that's really what Netanyahu is doing. He's trying to destroy the ceasefire, but also he wants to kill people so that the Israeli people will, give him some more leeway, give him more, because this is a genocidal society, as we've seen in the polls.
Yeah, no, I've been watching those videos out of Lebanon today as well. Apparently been just bombed non-stop the whole day, and also the videos are coming out of residential areas, so just men, women, and children slaughtered. And for all the people who are who say that they're relieved that there's a ceasefire, it's very strange that there's not more of them speaking out against this, because this is, well, predictably, this is destroying the ceasefire. Well, it's a violation of the ceasefire.
Well, Glenn, I'm sorry for interrupting you for the second time, but why would they say anything? I mean, Trump has been saying that he's going to obliterate Iran for a few weeks now. Recently, he's been saying he'll take Iran back to the Stone Age, and just less than 48 hours ago, he said that he's going to erase the Iranian civilization from the earth. Have you seen any major Western journalists speak up in outrage about the threat to carry out the greatest Holocaust in human history by far? Have you seen any Western, even opponents of Trump? Have you seen the Washington Post, the Guardian, or any of these progressives, mainstream, or liberals or conservatives, those who are in the mainstream? Have any of them expressed outrage saying you want to commit? Have you seen the New York Times put out a big piece shaming Trump and saying you're a war criminal? No, because for the empire, we are all worthless. We are all Amalek, just like with the Zionists. We are all Amalek. We are subhuman to them. We're subhuman to those journalists who have 2 million, 3 million followers, hundreds of thousands of followers, but have said nothing. So why should they be outraged by the slaughter of Lebanese women and children? In fact, what they will try to do is justify it. You'll see in Western reports that these are Hezbollah strongholds or Hezbollah bases, whereas they've known throughout that the Israeli regime carries out the Dahiya doctrine. In other words, flattening the city, just like mowing the law in Gaza. Dahiya is southern Beirut. They mean, destroy it. And mowing the lawn means Gaza, flattening it. That's open policy. But none of these Western journalists say anything because they have no moral compass. And when I say the West is governed by the Epstein class, that's exactly what I mean. The media is owned by the Epstein class, These are just media workers for the oligarchy, and the governments are owned by the Epstein class. Otherwise, what sane person would watch this slaughter and not be outraged?
I think that's a fair point. I saw this, also news report coming out of BBC where they allegedly interviewed an Iranian in Tehran who argued that, well, if the US will destroy all power plants, bridges, and also even drop a nuclear bomb on Tehran and wipe out everything, I guess, it would be better than living under this regime. And this is kind of it's I think it's important because it's not as if this genocidal mindset is limited to Trump alone. It's very much something you see beyond, which is kind of frightening. And also it's very self-destructive for the West, you can say, because in the West, the whole political West bases its legitimacy on the whole humanitarian liberal democratic narrative. So when you, on the other hand, go in providing legitimacy for a Holocaust against the Iranian civilization, then it's you spark a legitimacy crisis within as well. But I did want to ask: the ceasefire is supposed to be the terms over the next 2 weeks, but over these 2 weeks, negotiations have to persist for something more concrete. Something where Trump can't just tweet something out in 20 minutes from now, where he essentially puts Lebanon out of the deal, or how is the 2 weeks enough? Do you think anything can actually come out at the end of these 2 weeks?
I think if things go very well, the 2 weeks will be extended, and maybe they'll agree on some minor issues or some easier issues to deal with. But I don't believe that we're going to have an agreement with the United States over the 10 points that Iran has put in the plan, because that's not how the United States works. It is an empire, and it's an arrogant empire, and Trump is the most arrogant of the arrogant emperors of empire. And in addition to that, he's all over the place. He'll say something today and something else tomorrow. He'll say something this morning, something else this afternoon. He'll say something in one sentence and say the opposite in another. So I do not envy those who are going to be negotiating with the United States, directly or indirectly, or passing messages back and forth. But what I think is right now the big question is whether we're going to have renewed fighting between Iran and the United States in the coming weeks. Again, I think I'm sure that the Iranians are preparing themselves as we speak for further bloodshed and further attacks. But I think that it will be, as I said earlier, difficult for Trump to restart this war, because it's already very unpopular and it has gone nowhere. And there's absolutely no sign that Iran has grown any weaker. For 40 days, the Iranians have been firing missiles day and night at the Israeli regime, at the U.S., missiles and drones, at U.S. assets in the Persian Gulf, and at proxies that are complicit in the war. There's no end to the capabilities of Iran for the months to come. My understanding is that Iran has far more missiles and drones than anyone can imagine. We've discussed this before. Iran has been preparing itself for this war for 25 years. And Iran is very confident about its capabilities, and the failure in that operation that was to steal Iran's uranium. I think that also contributes to the pressure on Trump. So I think for a host of reasons, it's going to be difficult for him to restart it. But I think that, again, Iran is not going to take any chances. It's going to prepare itself.